Jon Prosser just surprised us with an exclusive first look at the redesigned iPad mini 6 on his new website, frontpagetech.com, and from the looks of the renders created by Zelbo, everything looks pretty legit to me. So in this video, I'm gonna go through each little detail that he leaked and discuss how and why it makes sense for Apple to do, and then give you guys my thoughts on when it could potentially be coming. First off, I do want to mention that Jon got his info from multiple sources, including leaked schematics, CAD files, and real hands-on images of the redesigned Mini. So this isn't just a guess or anything like that, so let's get right into those renders. Alright, so I've got my M1 iPad Pro right here, and in this first image, we can see the iPad mini 6 on top, the new one, and the current iPad Air 4 on the bottom, and from the looks of it, they share the same design. So it looks like the Mini's getting the same redesign as the Air already has, but if we take a closer look, you can see that the Mini now gets the new wireless magnetic charger for the Apple Pencil, which is very interesting. And I don't know if you guys can tell, but if you look at it, the one on the Air is actually quite a bit wider, but don't worry about that because if you take a look at the iPad Pro's wireless magnetic charger, it is actually quite a bit thinner than the one on the Air, so I'm not sure why Apple made it so thick on the new iPad Air. And as far as the new Mini, this essentially means that it's gonna support the new Apple Pencil 2, so you no longer have to worry about plugging it into that lightning port to charge, which was very annoying. That's definitely a good sign. And of course, these new renders and leaks from Jon perfectly match up to what Mark Gurman from Bloomberg said recently, that the iPad mini is gonna have narrower screen borders with the removal of the home button, which was expected. And now moving on to this image, this is where it starts to get very, very interesting with a few different details. First of all, if you look at that camera bump, it looks essentially identical to the one that's on the MacBook Air. And on top of that, we have that mic right next to it on the side, whereas on the Air, it's below it. So it looks like it's getting the same exact specs in terms of the rear cameras. But the absolutely crazy thing from this render is that apparently the iPad mini 6 is getting the smart connector, which it has never had before. And this is really weird because the iPad mini has never had the smart connector on the back, and that's because the Mini is so small that it can't really support regular keyboard cases. Even the one on the 11-inch iPad Pro is scrunched down compared to the full-size 12.9-inch model, so I don't know how Apple is gonna pull off a keyboard case on the Mini unless this is for something else, so I don't know, it's gonna be very interesting. One random thought that I'm having is that what if Apple is gonna use that smart connector for charging? And maybe, what if that smart connector makes it on the back of the next iPhone to use with a brand new charger that kind of just tacks onto the back that also supports all of the iPad Pros? Because I don't know if you know this or not, but the Magic Keyboard case supports full speed charging through the smart connector with that new hinge. But anyway, moving on to this next image, we can see that the Mini is getting basically the same edge-to-edge display with the rounded corners, the same as on the Air. But the interesting detail to notice is that the bezels are definitely slimmer on the Mini, which is nice, and it totally makes sense because if they were the same size, the display would look really weird, especially for that small of a size. And this actually makes me think that the next iPad Air is gonna have the same slim bezels as the Mini, because I don't know if you know this, but back in 2019, the 10.5-inch iPad Air 3 received the same thin bezels on the sides, matching the ones on the Mini. And as for this new Mini 6, you should expect the display to remain basically the same, probably including the same resolution, since the pixels per inch on the current Mini is already much higher than their 264 pixels per inch goal for their iPad displays. Now moving on, according to Jon Prosser, he says that the iPad mini 6's new dimensions are gonna be 3mm longer and 3mm wider while keeping the thickness exactly the same. So this is essentially gonna allow the display to get much larger, which means Ming-Chi Kuo thinks is going to be around 8.5 to 9 inches on the new Mini. And moving on, as expected, Touch ID is being built into the power button just like it is on the iPad Air 4, and because of the smaller size of the Mini, it's probably going to be easier to use compared to the Air, but in my opinion, Face ID on the iPad Pro is much better. But of course, Apple's gonna be keeping that as an exclusive feature just for the pros. And here is the weird part. There are no speaker grills on the top of the iPad Mini 6 like there are on the iPad Air 4. So I asked Jon about this on Twitter and he confirmed that the speakers will only be on the bottom, which is very frustrating because we know that it's not getting full stereo sound when you hold it in landscape mode. But nevertheless, Jon says that his sources say that the speakers are crazy nice, even if they're only gonna be on the bottom, which sounds a bit weird to me. But I guess in reality, since the iPad Mini is so small, there's probably a limited amount of space on the inside for those extra speakers. Now moving on to the next image, we have the bottom, which shows those speaker grills, and apparently a new USB-C port, which is awesome, and it totally makes sense because when Apple redesigned the iPad Air 4, they gave it USB-C, so it makes sense for the iPad Mini as well, and that's gonna give you access to a bunch of docks, adapters, and of course, it's a much better port. And this right here is very interesting. Jon's sources say that the iPad Mini 6 is gonna be coming in silver, gold, and black. Not space gray, but black, so that's gonna be interesting to see. And right here, we can see the Apple Pencil support, which the Mini has, but one interesting detail he says is that there was an Apple Pencil 3 leak a few months ago, but he compared that leaked image to the size of the current Apple Pencil, and he's showing that the new Apple Pencil is a little bit shorter. And that actually makes total sense for the Mini, because if you think about it, the current Apple Pencil 2 is almost the same length of the current iPad Mini, which is very funny. So a shorter Apple Pencil makes total sense. But then going even further, Jon thinks that this might actually be the new Apple Pencil 3 that's meant for all of the iPads. And if you think about it, the current Apple Pencil does seem unnecessarily long. So making it a bit shorter wouldn't be that big of a deal. And on top of that, it's gonna make it much easier for younger kids and students to use compared to the current Apple Pencil. But based on all of those leaked details and the renders made by Ian Zelbo, we can actually do some extra analysis to figure out some more details like the potential release date, the price, and some more of the specs. So since the new Mini 6 seems to be essentially a smaller version of the iPad Air 4, right down to the camera bump, the design, and of course the display, we can almost certainly expect a lot of the specs to match up. And we know that because in 2019, the iPad Air 3 and the iPad Mini 4 were essentially identical in terms of the specs and features apart from the smart connector. So if we look at the specs of the latest iPad Air 4, we should expect the new Mini to get 64 gigs of storage at the base price, the same Touch ID power button, the same 20-watt USB-C power adapter, all of the same display features, the same 12-megapixel camera on the back, the same 7-megapixel camera on the front, and the same Wi-Fi 6 support with Bluetooth 5.0. But according to Jon, he says that it's going to be coming with 5G cellular support, which isn't currently on the Air 4. So that means that Apple might actually update some of the other specs as well. And right here, Jon says that the new Mini is going to be getting the A14 chip, which makes total sense because the iPad Air 4 currently has the A14. And originally, I thought that it wouldn't make sense at all for the Mini to come later this year because Apple is going to be revealing the new A15 chip in the new iPhone 13. So it would be weird for the Mini to get released after that with the previous gen chip. But then I did a little bit of digging and I found that every single iPad Mini, except for the second generation model in 2013, received a chip one generation older than the iPhone that was released that same year. And the reason the 2013 iPad Mini got the same A7 chip as the iPhone 5S is probably because the A7 was the very first 64-bit chip to be used in a smartphone, which was a very big deal for Apple. So with that said, A14 on the iPad Mini 6 makes total sense, and Jon's sources say that it's going to be coming by the end of this year, which also makes sense because in the past, most of of the iPad minis were revealed in the fall. And as far as the price tag, I personally think that it's going to be starting at $499, simply because of the fact that Apple raised the iPad Air 4's price by $100 last year up to $599, and it was totally justified because of the new redesign, at least from Apple's perspective. So that ended up leaving a nice little gap for the mini to also get a price jump up to $499, and that means that the regular iPad 9 will also get bumped up to probably around $399 when it eventually gets the full redesign. But based on all of these details and renders, I have a pretty good feeling that the iPad mini 6 is going to be very popular even with a higher price tag, and I think we can for sure expect it to get released between September and November. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, go ahead and click the circle above to subscribe. Definitely check out one of those two videos right there. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.